Hey, welcome to Epic FM. I'm Northy and I'm one of the players of Epic Flail. Some of you might know us from the War Machine content that we've created over the years, the events that we've been to. Some of you might have just randomly found this channel on YouTube search or some random forum that I've put it on. Either way, thanks for tuning in. Please like and subscribe for more content. We're going to be doing more 40k focused content with myself, but some of the other guys will be creating all sorts of other stuff on other game systems in the future, I'm sure. But if you like 40k, please make sure you like and subscribe. Also, let us know what you think in the comments below, as long as you're not a total moron and have something positive to say. If you've not got something positive to say, do you know what? Just say it anyway, because it's good character building in it. Appreciate you. So in this series of videos, I'm going to be talking about my experience of playing Warhammer 40,000 competitively. Now, although I'm new to 40k, competitive 40k, I've played it since I was like 11, 12 years old. I played loads of editions. I played it when like all the models were just the same sculpt. Do you remember the Gretchens? And it was just like, you'd get like 40 of them. They're all exactly the same. Or the Orcs, they just had the botgun and the axe. I mean, yeah, I don't know how well I played it back then, but I certainly played it and I spent a lot of time in the Games Workshop. But in my 20s, I left GW and left GW? It sounds like I worked at GW. In my 20s, I stopped playing Games Workshop games, did a whole bunch of other stuff that a lot of people do in the 20s, and then kind of came back to gaming, competitive wargaming in my 30s and played a game called War Machine. Played that for many years with a whole bunch of guys from Epic Flail up and down the country and did it at a pretty decent level. I won Masters events. I've captained WTC teams. I've been to WTC representing England like 6 times, and we've podcasted on the subject of War Machine and competitive gaming for a whole bunch of years. But recently, War Machine's changed a lot, and a lot of us are playing different games, trying out different systems. I decided to check out 40k, partly because I love the lore of 40k. I've always read 40k books. I think the models are absolutely amazing. I love the universe, and I moved to a new area, so I thought, why not play some 40k? Why not check out 40k? So that's what I've been doing. I've been immersing myself in 40k. I've painted an army up. I've got an Imperial Knights army that I've been painting for the past 3 or 4 months. I've started playing in a league in Brighton, and I've started playing just like casual and competitive games. So in this series of videos, I'm just going to be logging and talking about my experience, contrasting it to other game systems that I've played, having very honest and frank conversations about where the game feels to be at, and also just sharing the things that I've learned and enjoyed, not enjoyed, and hopefully getting feedback from the community of what I could do better and just getting some engagement from you guys out there. So as I said at the beginning of the video, please let us know what you think in the comments, as long as you're not a complete clown. Well, a professional clown's fine. As in, if you're not a professional clown, but you act clown-like, maybe watch another video. Okay, so the first thing that I wanted to reflect on, the games that I've started to play, is there's this whole concept of like playing with intent. And I've read a bunch about this and had people talk to me about it when I've been playing. I obviously come from a game that was obscenely precise. War Machine, I feel like you kind of, I don't know whether you had to play with intent because everything was really obvious and clear. Like the terrain was 2D. So if you wanted to hide something behind a building, you would very easily and clearly hide it behind the building. If an opponent in their turn was like, I'm going to shoot that model, and they had line of sight, you wouldn't really be like, oh, actually, I intended for it to be out of line of sight. Your opponent would be like, but it's not. The base is sticking out. I'm going to shoot it with this gun that can see it with a laser pen. What are you on about playing with intent? You just play as it is on the board because it's a very precise game. Whereas this whole thing in 40k, and it makes sense, I can understand why, where you describe your intent with your opponent and kind of make sure you're both happy with it. Now, that seems a very clear thing. It's obviously a good thing, but it's slightly different to what I'm used to. So 40k, obviously you've got lots of terrain. You're playing in these big cityscapes, like complex environments. So there's lots of terrain, and often that terrain isn't flat. It can be bumpy. And the terrain rules itself in 40k are a little bit, not so much unclear, but just a little bit messy. There's no defined, in the rulebook it kind of says this is a crate, this is a ruin. But people obviously use all sorts of different types of terrain. So there's quite a process of just making sure you understand and get what the things on the board are in the rulebook, and you're playing as they're intended to be. But when it comes to actually playing the game, often models don't sit perfectly on the terrain, and there's this whole idea and concept of letting your opponent know what your intention is with regards to placement to create a more positive and precise gaming experience. That in essence seems like a good idea. Why would you ever think that is a bad idea? But I can see issues arising when people don't play with that level of intent. So that is a bit of a change of pace from War Machine, where you wouldn't have to be so explicit. You just move a thing there, and it was either in line of sight or out of line of sight. Whereas in Warhammer 40,000, because there's no base as such, your line of sight is nothing to do with the base of the model. It's to do with the actual model itself, and line of sight is real. Can this model see that model if I get down at eye level? There's no laser pointers from above. It's just like look from the model and see what you can see. And obviously that's to create a more enjoyable, immersive experience. Warhammer 40,000 is not designed as a competitive game. It's designed as a war game which people can engage with and enjoy. It's not like other systems where they're like, right, we want to keep this really slick, really trim, focus on competitive rule set. That's not to say it can't be played competitively, because I'm having a fun experience doing it. And as you'll see in the videos that I'm going to do, I'll have more competitive experiences, and I'm sure I'll keep enjoying it. But the game in itself is not designed solely with that in mind. So this concept of playing with intent, of saying to your opponent, right, this tank, my intention is so that your Imperial Knight over there can't see this Lehman Runs battle tank, and it is hiding behind this piece of terrain. And your opponent gets down and goes, well, actually, I can see the turret. It's the turret sticking out, so I can shoot it. I can see 2 millimeters of the turret. So you go, okay, well, I'll just move it a little bit that way. Is that okay? Can you see it now? No, I can't see it now. That's great. Cool. I played with intent. I've let you know that tank is in position. I want it to be in a position that you can't see, and we'll both agree that that is the case and move on from it. That seems fine. If you, however, don't make that really clear, and your opponent's turn, they're like, oh, great, I can see 3 millimeters of your turret. I'm going to shoot it. I can see how that very quickly causes problems. So the concept of playing with intent feels slightly new, because I didn't feel like I had to do it as much in War Machine. You'd still let your opponent know what you were doing, but there was never, you could either see something or you couldn't see something based on the, precise placement of the board. The other bit that kind of fits within the playing with intent thing, I'm used to playing game systems where the movement was very precise. If you wanted to run something 10 inches, you'd put a 10-inch measurement stick down and you would move it precisely 10 inches. And the intent was always very clear because everything was so precise. 40k is a little bit fast and loose with the measurements I've found. Even at a competitive level, it's not as precise. People are kind of moving models a bit more ad lib, because obviously the measurements matter less because everything's got really long ranges. Even charges can be a little bit downtown. So I don't know, maybe as I get more games in, the precision will increase with regards to movement and measurement, but that's certainly a little bit of a learning curve and a little bit of a readjustment. The second thing is, like, there are just so many rules. Not so much the rule book itself. I think the rule book itself and the one with 40,000 rules is quite quick to get your head around. But outside of that, there are so many stratagems to absorb. And again, I'm coming from a game system where I just think there's so many rules in War Machine. There are so many models, so many casters, so many different spells. So it's kind of similar to that. It's like knowing all the spells in War Machine is like learning all the stratagems in 40k, but the churn for 40k is quite intense. It's quite aggressive with a persistent release schedule from Games Workshop. They're always bringing out a new codex with a new bunch of stratagems that you kind of need to get your head around. Now, another edition might change that. The World Eaters Codex is a little bit lighter on the rules, so maybe GW are moving into an environment where that's less of an issue, where it's a bit thinner and trimmer in terms of the rules. But if you just look at 9th edition, there's just so much to learn, so much to get your head around. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but from a competitive environment, in terms of getting good at the game, getting used to the game, winning events, winning tournaments, just winning games, there is a huge amount of information to quickly get your head around and then keep it updated. Just keep learning and keep revising those new stratagems, as they come in. So again, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's a hell of a learning experience. The next thing I've reflected on is, in other game systems, particularly game systems that are designed for competitive play, then you obviously have a dialogue with your opponent before you play any game as to, like, what's your experience level, how many games have you had, like what kind of, you wanting like just quite a chilled game, or you wanting something quite competitive. You obviously can have those conversations and are important, but they don't feel as important as they do in 40k. You obviously got this huge number of people playing 40k for loads of different reasons. Some people just want the thematic experience of painting an army and getting it on the table, and they're not really that bothered about who wins, just want to have fun. And then at the other end, you've got that much sharper kind of competitive play, people taking meta lists, and they're really refined, they want a clean, sharp game. Obviously, I've found it not challenging, but interesting navigating that with people and kind of having a discussion beforehand at list selection point, almost before you've met up, being like, what kind of game are you after? Because the gap between what a relaxed, what do you call it, like nachos and dips or whatever. I don't know what the phrase is. You know what I mean? Crisps and drinks, beer and pretzels. That's it kind of game. Versus like, yeah, no, I'm going to a tournament soon. It's a big gap, so it's been useful having those conversations beforehand. The downside to that is it's difficult. I found it harder to have anything in the middle because, like, I've been building a list that feels competitive, but it's quite hard to play that list at like a non-competitive, more chilled level. That might be because I'm playing Imperial Knights and like they are just a little bit skew in nature, but I found that balance a little bit harder. In terms of the community, though, it feels pretty great. There's loads of people playing the game. There are loads of tournaments going on. I've joined a league in Brighton where there's like loads of really sound people playing Warhammer 40,000, get a game in every week. And there's a decent, thriving community. There's also loads of information. Obviously, they can just get out there and watch battle reports, learn about the game and kind of just throw yourself in it, which is a lot of fun. That's great coming from a game that was, I mean, to be fair, War Machine in its heyday was pretty big in the UK and we had a really thriving, healthy community, but it's nice going into something new and just seeing all that information out there and meeting new people. So I'm pretty excited about that as well. And in the coming months, I'll be going to some events and tournaments and then feeding back to you guys, doing a video about how that went and probably doing some footage at events. So they're kind of like my main initial observations and reflections about competitive gaming. I'm really enjoying my games. It's been fun. I love the models. I love the universe and like I'm naturally finding the competitive gaming side of it just as fun, just as enjoyable. Obviously, I'm very early on in that and I've got lots more games to come and events to go to, but I'm enjoying it a lot so far. I think there are some things that I'm surprised don't exist in a competitive environment. Maybe they do. Maybe people can correct me in the comments. But for one thing, like tokens, just a lack of tokens. I mean, some people use some nice little sort of widgets or tokens to mark damage, but a lot of people just absolutely just putting dice by my models. That seems like fairly standard and fairly normal, but there are lots of abilities that you put on models and things that will affect it at a later point in the game, and tokens would feel like a good way of not only helping players manage all those rules that exist, but also just the whole, not so much playing with intent, it's just playing clearly and openly. You know, I will cast that spell on that unit. There is a token representing that spell. Maybe that goes on, maybe it doesn't. It certainly doesn't at a more casual end of things. You've just got to remember stuff. And also, I know you can buy from GW the cards that have all the stratagems on and different stuff, but surely there is a better way of just managing the huge rules bloat. The Games Workshop app is awful. Like, it doesn't work properly. I know people use the Warpedia or whatever, but even that's just like navigating through a website. It's still a little bit clunky. There's Battlescribe to make lists on, and I know you can get a single document that has a bunch of rules that you pre-select, but the whole thing just feels quite clunky and disjointed, and you're kind of going everywhere. So it's frustrating that GW app isn't really up to standard. It wants you to buy all the rule books to get all the rules, which is really frustrating. But it's also weird that there aren't like just cards or things you could have out in front of you for like quick and easy reference. Again, I'm thinking of War Machine where every model would have a card. This is back in the day. You'd have the card out so you could just kind of see what it is straight away. Or the app that was made by PP would just very quickly and easily be able to jump around and look at all the rules. So that feels like a slightly missed opportunity. Maybe it does. Maybe there are tools that people use at a competitive level that I've not seen. It certainly helped me with ADHD to try and keep information in one place rather than it being absolutely everywhere, which is a bit of a nightmare. But all in all, so far, it's been a really fun experience. The like few games, well, I think I've had like 8, 9 games now. They've all been really fun games. I'm looking forward to getting out into a more competitive environment. It's obviously a much bigger meta. There's loads of different lists. There's like that turnover and churn of armies is pretty intense. So the bit that's slightly frustrating is in other game systems that I've played, you could get a couple of competitive lists and you invest in those lists and buy those models and paint them up. And then you knew there'd be that, you know, you knew you could have a decent time with them and have a chance of winning an event. Whereas 40k, like the meta just seems to bounce and jump and chop and change all over the place. The new Grand Tournament, the Mission Pack, Arcs of Omen, with its changes to how lists are made, broadening out the detachment options, allowing you to take other detachments, not just troops. Basically, you can mix it up. Maybe that will create more list variety. I mean, I don't know. I've not been playing long enough or I'm experienced enough, so I'll leave that to people that have. But hopefully, the meta settles a little bit. I know 9th edition has had different dips and dives, and there's a period in time where it was just all over the place, and there were some factions that were hugely overpowered. Hopefully, it's slightly more balance now. But again, it comes to that tension with GW's persistent release schedule and models. And ultimately, we're playing a game which isn't just made for competitive rule sets in mind. If anything, it's made for that broader, just people painting models. GW have always said, haven't they? This gets said all the time. GW are a model company first and a rules company second. Like, they're in the business to make cool models and get people playing the game rather than make a really slick rule set. But either way, hopefully that was an interesting discussion, and you'll join me on this journey as I explore the hobby in more detail, particularly with an eye on that competitive end of the spectrum. Let me know what you think in the comments. Like and subscribe for more content like this. And thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Oh, don't be a clown. Thanks for not being a clown.